Hello and welcome to all of you to this meeting, to this conversation that today the European Council on Foreign Relations is hosting on the topic of European values based on a survey that we published. It's an annual survey that we do together with the European Cultural Foundation. It is called European Cultural Sentiments Compass. And in this year's survey, my colleague Pavel Zerka has been arguing that actually it's not only about how Russia is tackling the war, but it's also about how Europeans react to it in terms of their attitudes, in terms of their instincts of perhaps even boycotting Russian culture, the Russian society. We have been doing a lot of research on attitudes across Europe on foreign policy topics, but this one particularly focuses exactly on the issues of values. It is therefore my real pleasure to have this conversation today with Commissioner Věra Jourová, whom you probably all know, but one thing you may not know is that next to her law degree, actually, she has a master's degree in, in theory of culture. And so I believe this is really also the right moment for us, Commissioner, to look back now over a year since the beginning of the war and to ask ourselves, how are we as societies behaving in this war? And is this really a challenge for our societies? Many say that war crystallizes what we stand for. What do you think European values should look like in times like this?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Indeed, the values are my everyday bread, so I am happy to share with you how I see the condition in which European Union appears now. The war, I believe, is to a large extent a game changer, because it is imposing enormous pressure on all of us. But at the same time, it's the recognition of the fact that the European Union is a peace project, and it was created at the background of the horrors of the Second World War, and it's a miracle that we created the continent where we didn't have any war, and we forgot about it. We forgot to emphasize that this is peace project, and now we have the situation when we have to prove that this is our strategy to keep peace in Europe, but also to keep our values high when they are under pressure. And the values are, of course, the rule of law, the system of balancing of powers, freedoms, but also solidarity. And I think that in all these we proved in the EU after the invasion started to Ukraine that these values are strong, that this is the glue, these are the principles which keep us together, which make us stronger. And here I have to use the name of Vladimir Putin, because for years he and his ideologists are ridiculing our society, our way of life. He is ridiculing the EU as a weak continent. And in fact, I think that he all the time, he fears of our system. And he started the invasion against Ukraine because Ukrainians showed very clearly that they want to join us and that they also want to have a democratic governance system with all the values, all the freedoms guaranteed, and so on. So the war is a game changer, but I would say that it makes us stronger. It makes us also able to show how values are important, because also several years ago, I can tell you, I was in commission. I'm already here for a long time, and I remember a lot of speeches when I spoke about democracy, rule of law, freedoms, peace, and the people were not very excited because yes, it's given, it's forever, and it's not. So now we see it, and you said it, Madame Vessela, very well, that the key thing is what happens. This is essential, but more important is. Much more important is how we react. According to some wise people, I read some study that it's only 10% importance of what happens. 90% is the impact of the proper reaction. And I'm sure that the EU, together with the allies, and here comes the geopolitical context, together with the allies, we react in the best possible courageous and self-confident way. With the blessing from the side of the citizens. And this is, I have to add it. Yeah, because the leaders are under big pressure, but they cannot do, in fact, too much without having the yes from the citizens. And here comes also the issue of the pressure imposed on us through the disinformation created and fueled to the EU from Russia. I think that the best weapon against that is the truth. We are in the very, very tense and uneasy situation when it's absolutely important that the leaders are telling the people the truth. And here I have to quote Winston Churchill, who came with his famous sentence, "I cannot offer you anything but blood, sweat, and tears." And I think that the people can stand it. They can bear unpopular, uncomfortable truths, but they have to know what they can expect, because the biggest enemy of European democracy, it's not Vladimir Putin, it's not the war, it's uncertainty, which is in our society. So this is what I could speak a lot longer about that, but back to you.
Thank you very much. I think this is now the right moment to tell to our viewers and our listeners that they can also ask questions in the chat box. My colleagues will be passing on to them to us, so that the commissioner can also tackle your questions. I was looking at the wall behind you, and I think I can recognize late President Havel behind you. And I just remember that he was actually, for us, the beacon of tolerance, of openness, of broad-mindedness. But today it seems to be dangerous to be too tolerant, to be too open, because we have so much disinformation, so much propaganda, and I guess the question is, where do you draw the line? How can the EU really kind of set the standard, right? What is disinformation? What is propaganda? And where is the limit where, so to say, the moral and the informational health of the society is basically preserved? And maybe I can add here the question also on the Foreign Agents Act, because I think it fits well in this broad topic. The EU has been thinking about how to regulate also the non-governmental sector in this respect, not only the disinformation coming through media.
The first thing, I think that the key thing is to not to be naive, and to be able, as I said before, to be able to react in the proper way. And for us, the freedom of speech belongs to the freedoms which are almost untouchable. But then there is a moment we have to realize that we have to draw the line somewhere. And we appear in information war. And we have the enemy who has decades of good training for propagandist wars. They are masters in that. I mean, the Russians. And I lived under the Russian occupation almost half of my life. From 1968 to 1991. Immediately when they invaded us in Czechoslovakia, they started censorship of Russian style, and this is nothing we want to see anywhere in Europe. But at the same time, we have to defend ourselves against the Russian war propaganda and against undermining and subverting the support of Europeans towards Ukraine, because this is the aim. And already several years ago, after the invasion to Crimea, it became obvious that disinformation is part of the Russian military doctrine. When I said it for the first time in I think it was February 2020, I was immediately placed on the Russian sanctions list, because it was a kind of taboo or something which is not politically correct to say, that Russia is using disinformation as a weapon. And now we have it here in full power, and we must draw the line. We must not be naive. That's why we are doing three things. We are protecting the freedom of speech. At the same time, we have taken action against the Russian media established by the regime. We started with RT and with Sputnik. There are several other so-called media which are just Putin's propagandist machines. It was a surprise for many, because many said, is this still European Union as we know it? Prohibiting media. Aren't we like Putin? And I can tell you, I know to laugh or whether to cry, because this is a just needed reaction. We had to react on the avalanche on the tsunami of Russian propaganda, which was promoting the war against Ukrainians, and which was promoting the narrative of Ukrainians as Nazis, as the nation which is not the nation. You know, this rhetoric, which was here in the 30s, in the previous century. I think that we need to do everything of it. And passivity led to Holocaust in the previous century. Passivity is not what we can afford to continue now. That's why we draw the line and we said these so-called media will not transmit their poisonous content anymore. And the second thing, we had to agree with the digital platforms and many other stakeholders with the independent media to accelerate the efforts to minimize the impact of disinformation on our society. Again, no censorship, rather fact-checking and delivering the trustworthy information to the people. So we have to protect our freedom of speech and our freedoms, our values, but we must not be naive anymore, because we appear in the war. And on your second question, indeed, on the I think 7th of June, we will adopt the review of the European Democracy Action Plan. And part of this review will be the new package, which will consist of the directive on increased representation, which is raising adrenaline and a lot of concerns in the EU. So thank you for giving me a chance to explain what we plan. And then there will be two recommendations to the member states. One, to strengthen the resilience and fairness of elections. And the second, the recommendation to protect and to support the civil society. Coming back to the directive, which you asked about. I will first tell you what we are not going to do. Because I can tell you, I didn't expect the comparisons with Georgian law or with Russian law, and what we are planning cannot be compared with the American FARA law or with the Australian law, because we are not creating a system where we will label somebody. We never thought about labeling somebody foreign agent, or we are any criminal sanctions like you can see it in American or Australian law. We are not going to stigmatize anyone. What we want to introduce is a system of transparency, which will mean that the actors operating on the European single market might be also NGOs, but many other entities operating on our European single market, being contracted by third country governments or entity connected with the government. So not with anybody, but there must be this governmental link. So these European entities who have contracts with the foreign countries' governments will have to make it transparent, will have to announce it publicly that they are contracted to do some service in Europe for the third countries. And we do not differentiate between good countries or bad countries. Yeah? This is also ideologically totally neutral. We just want transparency. We want the public to know which governments are ordering some works, some services from the entities in the EU. It should be annual update of this information. We will give the chance to those who will fear of some stigmatization, that they may ask not to be registered in that public part of the registration. So we try to avoid abuse or some negative effect on those who will be registered. One very important thing to mention: we are embedding and including a lot of concrete safeguards so that this law cannot be abused by some European governments. We have to be able to predict the worst. So I want to say that there are going to be articles which in fact prohibit the member states to go beyond the requirements which are by this directive. So I don't know if you have additional questions, because I really appreciate the possibility to explain in a rather detailed way already, because we are in an enhanced stage of internal communication. So I can reply. It's not still ready, because I have ahead of me maybe maybe difficult or demanding discussion within the Commission. So I expect also valuable comments and recommendations from all the colleagues. We are still consulting outside. We had the consultations which ended up on the 14th of April. In fact, this consultation created a lot of concerns and some kind of conspiracy theories even. And maybe one personal comment to finish with this and to be ready to answer additional questions. I think that I am in the Commission already almost 10 years, and the Commission was always the institution was supporting civil society financially, politically, strategically. And so now I am a bit disappointed that there are so many names from the civil society organizations without reading what will be in the law. This prediction that we want to do harm is a bit bitter pill for me to swallow. But this is not about Jourova's feelings. This is about hard work now. And we really want to create a model which will be balanced, which will not deliver any danger or risk to the civil society organizations, which will only increase the transparency and knowledge of which are the external governments, third-country governments, which are using internal EU services.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I really appreciate it, because I think this is very important package, which is, as you said, going to concern many actors, most notably the non-governmental sector. But also, I believe, and you indicated that, it is something of concern to the member states as well, because for some member states, the, let's say, vulnerability towards foreign propaganda, towards disinformation, towards foreign influence is higher than in others. We have in our tool, in the compass, and maybe we can show this one slide, we have highlighted two countries, one that I come from, Bulgaria, but also Hungary, as being most vulnerable the next slide, please. Most vulnerable to, exactly, that's the one, to foreign influence, but they're also, in terms of media, there are other countries who are actually low on media rankings. And my interpretation, and I have been discussing this also with my ECFR colleagues a lot, is that a lot of that impact comes through corruption channels. Corruption can make really third countries influence public disputes, public discussions, influence government decisions. And for some of that, of course, NGOs are used, but there are also political parties, there is also media. How fit is the EU to cope with this challenge? What can be done in order to decrease this vulnerability to third actors?
Yes, well, I described what we are planning now in the legislation, that we simply want to know. And what is very visible now is the Russian. But there are a lot of countries which are imposing very invisible influence. And the difference between influence and interference, we are not able to judge where we are now, because we don't know how big the financial flows are, and what kind of services and influence or interference the third country actors are ordering in the EU. So we were criticized for not doing the impact assessment. But honestly, I have to be very open. We do not have sufficient data to measure the scope of the problem we have. And we cannot anymore live in uncertainty regarding the foreign interference and foreign influence. This foreign influence, of course, and it may be many positive things, but it also can be hostile interference. And this hostile interference, and here I will also add the disinformation campaigns, they always need to find the fertile ground. And referring to your map, I think it shows that the fertile ground is not equal in the member states. We have some countries where the citizens are rather immune against foreign interference or against the disinformation campaigns. the high level of immunization we see, for instance, in Ireland, in Finland, in Denmark. And when I look at these countries, they have a high level of education, including media and digital literacy. And I think that this is something we have to speed up. And I hear the voices who say, yes, but this is a long distance run. Yes, it's late to start now, but we have to start. And this fertile ground, and I have to come back to what I said at the beginning, that we have big enemy, which is uncertainty. In all our member states, we have people who live in uncertainty. Count with me the pile of uncertainty. This is the climate change. Young people are stressed, middle-aged generation as well, because of course we see that without the real action, the climate change will pose a horrible problem to the community. Digital transformation, which is not uneasy now, artificial intelligence, technological changes, where the society, we see that the society is not able to adapt with the same speed. So the result might be that part of the society will simply miss the train. And it also creates a lot of uncertainty. Then COVID, pandemic, then the war, and now inflation and energy uncertainty. This is a big pile, or in other words, I would say, very uneasy cocktail to drink. So this is all what I call fertile ground. This is what makes us vulnerable, and this is what should make all of us who are in the driving wheel now to offer solutions to people and to be clear and to tell them the truth. I know that it's my mantra, but working against disinformation, every time I come to the ultima ratio and main conclusion that the best medicine against disinformation is honesty and trust.
In education, as you said, which is a long-term process,
Yes.
while we have to cope with very short-term challenges. So I think this is a bit the gap now that we have to cope with.
If I may add one thing, where we are entering new very dangerous stage. And you mentioned corruption. This is, of course, we hear from the citizens always three things which make them not to trust anymore the democratic system. And one is inequality. We could speak hours about that. The second is abuse of power, and the third is corruption. So this is very important to speed up also the actions against corruption, be it repression or prevention. But what I wanted to add, what I see now that we are entering the new dangerous stage. Several years ago, still we saw that this interference and subversive actions and disinformation campaigns, it was done mainly from outside in a coordinated manner with the intention to do harm to European society. More and more, dangers are the internal players. Several years ago, we saw some dark scene, the people who were paid for distributing this information produced by Russia, for instance, or China. So individuals or organizations, some media. But more and more we see that the disinformation campaigns are becoming a kind of, I cannot say legitimate, but normal method for politicians. And we have a lot of them in the parliaments. We have them in the European Parliament. I sometimes have to shout there, which is not too much my style, but sometimes I cannot resist. We have a lot of those who are making political gain on disinformation in national parliaments, and we already have some of them in the national governments. And this is a dangerous trend, that disinformation can win elections. And I think that we have to stop this trend. So again, it's what you mentioned, where to draw the line. And my view is that while the digital tools and internet is easy vehicle to spread disinformation in order to win the elections, here I am with the elections. So while it is easy, it is very handy tool, this internet and social media, it should be as easy to debunk and to caught them lying through the same tools. That's why we want more fact-checking. That's why we want more and stronger independent media in the EU who can catch liars lying. And it may sound naive, but for me, this is much better method than introducing any kind of censorship.
Thank you very much. I think in the era of social media, censorship is very difficult to do anyway. But clearly, this is one thing that the EU that is far away from EU's values. There have been several questions Ukraine related in our chat. Because we're talking about the war, obviously about the information war, but there is also an economic war going on. So there is one question whether Europe should move into war economy to deliver the things that Ukraine needs. The other side to this war is also the civil society side. So there is a question about the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, whether we make enough use of that to cooperate with Ukraine. And in general, and this is the third question, will Ukraine join the EU? I guess all of those questions point towards the same direction. It's about our project, so to say. What is, based on the European values, how do you see our Ukraine project in the future?
Yes, great. Thank you very much. You know, I am a Czech lady, so I have a very strong instinct when it comes to this war, to the needed strong reaction against the Russian occupants, and for support to Ukraine. And I am so happy that the Commission and the EU as such is in fact speaking the same language as I do with my special instinct. Because we are very united. Of course, we see Hungarian actions against the sanctions and so on. At the end of the day, there was always the compromise somehow achieved. But coming back to your concrete questions, the first was whether we should not enter war economy. When we did everything to guarantee heating and energy sources for last winter, we were entering some kind of war economy because we started to speak about the interventions into the free market, price capping and windfall tax. You remember, it was the really big effort to keep the free market up and running, because that's our strength. And at the same time, to react in the proper, necessary way on the new economic and energy situation. The second example of it, and we were successful with energy issues, and we managed to switch off a big part of the Russian and the energy sources. The second example, recently we adopted the directive on production of ammunition. There is one article which looks innocent, but it's not, because we asked for the competence to order the producers of ammunition, European producers, to stop production for external contractors and to produce for Ukraine. There was not much interest or much attention to that, but for me this is a clear evidence taking unprecedented decisions, which we would not be able to imagine, I don't know, 3 years ago, including sending weapons to and money to Ukraine. The second question was about the civil society in Ukraine. Well, we are supporting, of course, through different channels, only civil society organizations, but also the journalists operating in Ukraine. It's my agenda, so I want to sell it now that we are already financing from the budget up to 30 million euros the work of the journalists working in the battlefield. We are mourning after every killed or kidnapped journalist there, and we are so grateful to all the courageous people who are in the country, be it the journalists, but also human rights defenders, health, medicine service people. This is incredible what they are doing. It's our moral obligation to support them as long as it's needed and as much as is needed. So the EU is helping. And also here I have to say we are not alone in it, because we have the allies also cooperating on that. How do I see the accession of Ukraine? Well, I'd like to see a good result of the process. The process is, as we always say, merit-based. So the work is to be done by Ukraine and Ukrainians. Already before invasion, Ukraine was working hard on adopting the acquis. They were at around 70% of the acquis absorbed by the Ukrainian legal system. Of course, there are things to be done in judiciary, in anti-corruption sphere, in prosecution, constitutional court. I think that there are still things to be done, that the reform is needed. The media law is in the freshly adopted, so we will discuss. We are discussing with the Minister of Culture, Alexander Tkachenko, about these things. So Ukraine is incredibly progressing in incredibly difficult conditions. They are heroes. And while we are struggling as democratic countries living in peace with everyday political operations, to manage the normal operations of the state, paying pensions, paying salaries, guaranteeing public services, and so on. And at the same time, they have 4 more things to do: to defend their country against the aggressor, to invest incredible effort in their diplomatic work, not only vis-a-vis the EU and EU leaders, but also in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, because there the narratives against Ukraine got a lot of, and they need Ukraine support also from India. Of course, they have to convince China to engage. So this is absolutely unprecedented diplomatic outreach. The fourth thing is the accession work. And I will now already be brief, and I will repeat myself. This is incredible how they are progressing. And for me, the accession perspective is key. I think that we should also be helping. Of course, there has never been promised fast track for Ukraine, because we have other countries which want to join the EU, which are working on the reforms. But at the same time, and it's the last thing I will say, we should not see the accession and membership as black and white thing, because I think what's important for Ukraine, that we are enabling them to join us in many different fields, which is already helping them. The access for their products without barriers, the access to our single market, the common energy grid, the support of transport investments, roaming. There are many things which are already available to Ukraine of today, as the country which only wants, which is at the stage of just planning to join us.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Jourová. Also, not only because we discussed the issue of values, which may sound very abstract to some, but you made it really sound very concrete in terms of legislation, in terms of concrete steps that the EU can undertake, but also for this outlook to the future of Ukraine and of the continent. I hope our viewers and our listeners were also as interested as we were in this conversation. Thank you very much again, and we hope to host you again soon.
Thank you very much, Madam Vessela. Thank you all, and see you maybe one day in the future. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.